If you've somehow managed to avoid heated rivalry over the past couple of weeks, then I commend your social media game, because it is far, far better than mine. Heated rivalry has been all over my social media feeds for the past couple of weeks, and I think you'd have to be pretty much living under a rock not to have at least heard of it. I've been interested in reading some sports romances for a while. It's not something I've tried before, but when I was in Rare a few years ago, I was completely surprised to see that sports romance took up an entire room of the book festival. And especially since it was in the UK, and a lot of those sports were sports that aren't particularly popular here, and yet they were doing so well. It made me really interested, but since I'm not usually a contemporary romance girly, it's taken me a while to get around to it. I had been thinking about trying a vlog at some point this year where I read different romances across different sports, but when this TV show came out, I had about 6 different people through online friends and real life friends basically threaten to friend excommunicate me if I didn't watch the show. It's fairly obvious what we're going to be doing in this vlog. I want to try Heated Rivalry so that I can watch the TV show, and I also maybe want to try some other hockey romances to see what I think of the genre as a whole. So I have my first ebook, I have a month's Now TV subscription, and we're going to see how this turns out. Okay, so Heated Rivalry. I started it yesterday and I finished it this morning. I also, while I was halfway through it, maybe halfway through it, I decided I was gonna mess up my head so much, and we've already watched the first 2 episodes of the TV show. So to talk about the book first, in its kind of on its own, is it the best book I've ever read? No, it's not. It's the writing right from the start. I'm going to say the writing's not the best writing ever. The writing is, it's very stripped back, it's very basic, there's not a lot of description in it. There's not moments where you look at the prose and go, that's a beautiful line or a beautiful paragraph. It's very dialogue heavy, it's very kind of inner thought heavy, and we focus almost entirely on Ilya and Shane. There's very little world building going on around them. There's no hockey in this hockey book, which I had been told that there was no hockey in this hockey book, but there's really, really not. So on the plus side, knowing nothing about hockey did not impact my enjoyment at all. The book writing's very, very basic. What I will say though Rachel Reid is really good at doing is storytelling. The writing, we say nothing. It was fine, it was inoffensive. I've definitely read worse. What she does very well from a writing standpoint is, I think, tied into her sex scenes, her smut scenes, the romance. I've definitely read books that were more badly written in general, but I've even read books that were better written as a general rule, but had the cringiest sex scenes, both in like descriptions of what were happening and also in the dialogue of the characters. Yeah, there are books where that's rough. Really close the book and push it away and don't. Yeah, this, while the writing's not going to win any awards for itself, it also doesn't dip into that truly cringeworthy type of writing. So it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. Where she really excels is the storytelling aspect, and specifically as a romance writer, this is very, very much Ilya and Shane's romance. There are other parts, but very, very heavily told through the sex scenes, through the moments where they're together, their romantic moments. And what Rachel Reid does so well is manage to put her characterization into those scenes. Yes, there are a lot of sex scenes in the book, but I hate when people say that sex scenes are there and don't serve a purpose. Especially in a romance novel, they do if it's done well, and this is done well. Those sex scenes all do serve a purpose. They build both the inner characterization of both the characters. We see Ilya and Shane built up through their interactions with each other and their romance as a whole. All of it is done, by and large, during these romantic moments. There's very little else happening in the book, and she can't hide behind that. The chemistry between the characters, which is incredibly well done, incredibly good. The chemistry between them, the banter between them, the connection that you genuinely feel these characters having with each other is almost entirely done through those romantic moments, and she pulls it off. And I think that is a really good sign of a romance writer, because she has nowhere to hide. She's not putting this romance in as a subplot. She is balls to the walling it, and it really pays off. I really did feel for both Shane and Ilya as characters as separate entities. They both had their own inner conflicts, and also for them as a couple, the struggles they're going through as the book progresses. And all of that was done through their romantic interactions. So while the prose maybe isn't the best, I do think Rachel Reid got epic points on storytelling and characterization. I was a little bit surprised by how the book ends, but again, I think it was actually quite a brave choice. So again, full spoilers here. I really like that it didn't end with their happily ever after coming out to the press, or that romance trope of it ends with a marriage, or a marriage and a baby. I liked that this left it in a very happy for now stage. They've come so far, but by and large their relationship is still really hidden. They are now finding ways to be more publicly friendly with each other, starting this organisation, but it's not the peak of their happily ever after that we know both characters want. They get something approaching it. They get the happiest they can be at the point where the novel ends. But that doesn't mean there isn't still some way to go, and I think it was a bold choice to do that. As far as the show is concerned, and that is basically where I was being most bullied, it was that you should watch the show, and I had to read the book because I can't do it the other way. My brain, I can't. So the show has really been the point, and I'm just finished episode 2, and I'm enjoying it so far. I am. I think it's interesting as an adaptation, because I would imagine with most books going into an adaptation, but even more so with this one, because as I said, it's so heavily in their heads. There's so much. We really don't have a lot of plot activity that isn't these two pining after each other. There's the sex scenes, obviously there's the dialogue where they kind of banter back and forth, but so much of this book is just the pining for each other as they're in different locations or in the same location. A lot of it is happening internally in their heads. There's not a lot of action playing out on the screen, if you like. And so obviously the adaptation then has to find a way to do that. And I think sometimes it's been really successful and other times not so much. There's been a couple of points where things that were mentioned as a kind of internal thought from the character, or just part of that kind of narrative structure that's the character's viewpoint inside their head, they've had to be said out loud, and I feel those have been maybe a little bit awkward. They felt maybe a little bit turns to camera and says exposition, rather than feeling kind of a natural part of the story. They felt a little bit kind of thrown in because there had to be a way to throw it in. You can't have the inner dialogue happening. But on the other hand, I think it's also worked quite well. There's been moments where things that were played out on the page have had to be shown entirely through the actors' expressions, their body language, their awkwardness around each other, or their awkwardness around other people. And I think that added to the tension. The ones I'm thinking of is in the press conference where someone asks Ilya a question. It's quite a convoluted question and he doesn't grasp it. Shane steps in and answers the question instead. In the book, obviously, we get the full explanation that he's not grasping it because English is his second language, whereas on the screen, we just have to make that assumption for ourselves. And you had the actors' facial expressions, their feet touching, all of it came through without words, and that was actually really nice and really quite subtly done, which really worked for me really well. And I think that's probably going to continue through the series. Whether it's well done or not well done remains to be seen, but I do think that a consideration when making this would definitely have been that there is so much of this book that is quiet, that isn't, it's happening internally, and figuring out how to get that across to a viewer. This isn't Bridgerton where you have a lady Whistledown to narrate things to you. It's not even a story where you have the main character narrating over the top, I did this or I did that, or telling you how they felt in the moment. This is a show that has, I think, quite bravely decided not to do that, and we as a viewer can only trust in the expressions and the reactions of the actors. So I'm hoping that it's going to lean more towards feeling subtle and feeling confident, rather than some of those awkward moments where the two main actors are by far, these 2 episodes, they're definitely the standout. Feel incredibly well cast, both in portraying those characters but also in having the charisma and the ability to portray them. A couple of little things that I've maybe been less keen on are, it's not something I'm not keen on, but I do need someone to go through that first episode, more the first episode than the second episode. The first episode I felt very much like we were rattling through time. 30 seconds of footage 4 months later, a minute or 2 of footage 6 months later, a minute or 2, we were really barreling through the years really quickly. The second episode, I think that slowed down a little, but we are still racking up those 6 months later, 4 weeks later, 2 weeks later, 9 months later. And I need someone to go through that first episode and tally up those months, because I'm sure someone has went through that for continuity and the months add up. But I felt, as a viewer, just because it happened so often, that I felt that those months couldn't possibly add up. It felt like there were far more months later than there would be months in the time period we're talking about. But I'm sure it's fine. And in the book, obviously there were big jumps in the book as well, but I think just because it didn't stop to go 6 months later on the screen, it didn't feel like the time was really racing by the way it did in that first episode especially. So I have my queries about the months later issue. Also thought the actors looked a little bit older than the characters are meant to be in the book, which is a standard in TV and honestly something I'm quite glad about. In the book, them being 17 at the start does explain some of the jokey dialogue, it explains some of their awkwardness, it explains maybe some of the overconfidence in the idea that this relationship it's very foolhardy what they're doing. So if they were older, maybe they wouldn't have made that choice, they would have weighed up the pros and cons more, whereas they're impulsive, they're young, they go for it. But at the same time, I personally don't want to see actors that look 17 doing what these actors are doing. So I'm totally okay with the slightly aged up actor, even if it does mean that it makes it seem a little bit more risky and a little bit more, they should have known better. Whereas I think having them in the book, they're young and impulsive, that them taking those chances and those risks seems completely believable. It's a little bit harder when they look older, but on balance I would rather they looked older. Okay, so the last 4 episodes of Heated Rivalry. I had a really good time with these. I really enjoyed these. The last 2 episodes specifically I thought were really compelling. It all came together really well. Both those characters became more vulnerable in those last 2 episodes. Again, spoilers. But we see Elia's father die, we see him kind of come to the conclusion that he's all alone apart from Shane. We see Shane try to have a relationship with a woman, which I think maybe is episode 4. It falls apart early in episode 5 as he kind of realizes that he is gay and also that he's in love with Elia. And so the 2 of them are both in very, very vulnerable positions throughout episode 5, and then obviously episode 6 is very much giving them this, I guess it's like a daydream of the future. They go to the cottage together, they get to spend time together completely unguarded. Vulnerable separately and then vulnerable together in those last 2 episodes. The 2 before that were not bad. Episode 3 I think is essentially a fast run of the first book, because Heat Rivalry is the second book. The first book is Game Changer, and in that we are following a different hockey player. He's been in a few episodes, he's been scattered through, and he's actually the only actor really in the show that I already recognised. But He is, I guess, a little bit older. He's not near retirement age or anything, but he's maybe just a little bit older than Elia and Shane. And his kind of romance is with a smoothie maker. So it's a kind of non-hockey player. Their relationship happens in the space of that one episode and ends at a point where they're both so happy together, but Scott is very much in the closet, has no intention of leaving the closet. And we see another moment from them at the very, very end of episode 5, where Scott he wins his big Stanley Cup and he calls Kip down from the stands. They have a big public kind of coming out moment, and that is then what spurs both Shane and Elia into action. I think it's that idea of representation. They're finally seeing someone else take that first step, and it gives them the push they need, not to publicly come out, but to at least be honest with each other. And so I really, really enjoyed that 3rd episode, that one that is essentially Game Changer. So I think I'm gonna read that at some point. The books overall are definitely going into my TBR, my series TBR, it's somewhere over here, my series TBR jar. I'm not in any mad rush to read them all. I do know that some of them feature other couples, some of them feature Shane and Elia again, but I might read Game Changer soon because, like, I feel like the adaptation has done those 2 books, so reading those 2 books would kind of catch me up with where the TV show is. It was a great adaptation. I think I should say that, like, absolutely up front. As someone who, like, obviously has no real skin in the game of, I've not loved these books for years or been a fan for years, so there's no risk of it disappointing me, but also I'm probably not going to be defending it past what it's earned if there were problems, if that makes sense. There were entire sections where the dialogue was literally lifted from the book and scenes that were played out as they were in the book. If you like your adaptations to have an almost like for like, you know, page to screen translation, this is a very incredibly good example of that. There were a couple of very, very minor changes. I think maybe like the relationship that Elia and Svetlana had was a tiny bit different. We maybe, I guess in the book, maybe just saw some of the other teammates a little more, but very minimal. I can't actually think of any that were missed out in this, nothing important anyway. And then it had some elements that obviously were its own thing, completely separate from the book, that I was really impressed by. Mostly the 2 lead actors. Obviously that's not something that comes from the book. They're playing characters that are written, but a lot of it is also what they bring to it. And I think the 2 actors had incredible chemistry together. They really seemed like they knew each other, like they were fond of each other. That really came through on the screen. There were definitely moments where even when they were irritating each other, you could see a fondness in their eyes. That is obviously a combination of building a friendship while filming, acting, surprisingly, and I guess just that kind of spark that sometimes people have together. The 2 of them were just standout, and the casting department did such a good job on them. There are moments where the guy that plays Elia isn't speaking. There are no words coming out of his mouth. He's just facialing, and I'd be like, oh, he looks Russian. Like, what does a Russian look like? Like, I don't know if it's the body language or the micro expressions, but something about his way of communicating, even when we're not talking about language or accents, read as Russian, which, the acting. Also thought that, speaking of the actor that plays Elia, his Russian accent was so good. So often in anything that has Russian or Eastern European, to be honest, we get actors that sound like comic book villains or Bond villains or any kind of caricature villain, whereas I thought the Russian accents in the show were very, very good. Obviously I don't speak Russian and I'm not Russian, so I don't know what native speakers would think, but to me it sounded really, really convincing. So while I'm not battering down the doors of Rachel Reid's house for an advanced copy of the 7th book, and I'm not barreling out to read the entire series, I did really enjoy Heated Rivalry, both as a TV show and as a book. and I'm interested to read the rest of the series. Okay, so I lied, and I am going to be picking up the first book, the Scott and Kip book, Game Changer, next. Yeah, it's fine. This isn't a Rachel Reid vlog, I promise. But I really do want to read that first book now, so that's what I'm going to do. I said that I was going to just put Game Changers into my series jar and work my way through it casually, but clearly lies were told. This is Scott and Kip's story. Right off the bat, I'm going to say 400 pages. And I kind of feel like with contemporary romance, where there's not a historical element, a lot of fantasy world building, 400 pages I would say is too long. I enjoyed the book before we get off topic. I enjoyed the book. It was a very good book and we will get back to it. But 400 pages, I feel there should be a cut-off somewhere in the 360 bracket. I will give this one a pass though. Scott being so closeted, the little bit of push and pull between what they want each in terms of that. Kip wanting to be, he's a more social animal, he wants to be more honest with his friends and family, he wants to be seen around. Scott being, not just for his own reasons wanting to remain in the closet because it's scary and it's big, but also because he feels that he has the weight of his teammates' expectations on him and that it will be a distraction by the press, by the fans, for the team, whatever. And also he feels almost like, I guess he has the city's weight on him, especially as they lead up to this cup. His years of repression and secrecy and fear. All of that, I guess, needs time to play out. If you had a very short book, he would have to work through those issues very, very quickly. And I don't feel like that would be realistic either. I think that does need time to percolate through the story. You need time for him to wrestle with those ideas. So I'm giving the 400 page count a pass here and just putting it into the universe that I think 400 is just too long for a contemporary romance. This book though was a delight. I'd really enjoyed the episode, but it was really nice to see it play out here. The first half of the book, I would say, is pretty much the episode. Again, it's a very, very good adaptation of the first half of the book. Having read the book now, I am a little bit sad we didn't get more of that back half of the story. The agonising between the two about being out or not being out. It was hinted at, but we don't really see it play out to the same extent that we do in the book because it covers a much broader kind of page to minute ratio. And I did miss that. I also missed some of the very cute moments that were thrown in there. I noticed that instead of the museum scene from the book, which was very, very cute and I really liked, and as a museum girly, we got her as an art show when they were looking to buy some artwork for Scott's apartment. We didn't get to see Scott turn up at Kip's parents' house and make his little, oh, I'm his boyfriend, and then they sit down to their dinner and it's adorable. We didn't get to see Scott come out to his teammates, which again, maybe that wouldn't have been as impactful in the show because we also didn't really know Scott's teammates, whereas we got to see a lot more time with Scott and then with his teammates. We got to see his kind of three best friends and the dynamic between them. So when he came out to the three of them, it was a really beautiful, sweet, supportive moment with humour added in, which I really liked. In terms of everything, the whole heated rivalry universe so far, I'm not going to say that it's a hot take, but I think it might just be an uncommon opinion. I was told by a few people that if you're gonna read the books, skip Game Changer. Game Changer is trash. It's badly written, it's not as interesting, whatever. I think I preferred Game Changer to Heated Rivalry as a book. I think like my tier ranking would be like Heated Rivalry the novel was fun. It was like a upper 3, 4. And then from there, like you said, Heated Rivalry the novel, Game Changer the book, and the Scott and Kip episode on Heated Rivalry. Like, I thought the book was as good as the episode and vice versa. And then Heated Rivalry, again, was probably better than the thing. So like, Shane and Elia book, Scott and Kip, Shane and Elia TV, I think is where I'm sitting. But it was all great. While both Heated Rivalry and Game Changer focused on secret, forbidden relationships, I do think that Heated Rivalry has a pacier feel to it, maybe a more dramatic feel to it. It feels like higher stakes. Even though obviously for Scott particularly in Game Changer the stakes are incredibly high, there's something of a coziness to Game Changer that is maybe more illicit and more charged in Heated Rivalry. Will also say that I came out of both that episode of Heated Rivalry and Game Changers itself desperately in want of a smoothie. So, is it me that's easily influenced? Yes. But also, did she sell me that fucking smoothie bar? Yes, she did. This is not going to be a Rachel Reid vlog. I know I said it last time, but it's definitely not. I'm aware of the next 4 books in the series, with the 7th coming out towards the end of the year, but I'm not in any massive rush to get through them, and I'll probably aim to be finishing the series when the newest book comes out, because I think it's the last. For this vlog though, I still do want to try something that isn't in this universe. I still want to try another, we're doing gay now because that's what we've done, but another Hocky romance, and to see whether or not the Hocky romance thing is for me. What I will say about these books is the Hocky has been very minimal, and I still know absolutely nothing about the game. I know no more about Hocky than I did a week ago. I know no more about Hocky than I did before I started these books. There's no Hocky here. I'm also not massively bothered by that. Like, I had fun with the romance, but I would like to maybe see how that plays out across other authors' works. So I'm gonna have a little dig around and see what I can come up with, what I might be interested in grabbing next. I think this one could be quite good. Lucky Bounce by Kate Neri. It says it's a sweet and steamy sports gay romance, and it gets a fairly good rating. This one also seems quite popular. Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy, and this one, Thrown Off the Ice by Taylor Fitzpatrick. They all get really good ratings. There is also this one. It's a YA Hocky romance book. I've got to assume there's less kind of spice in it. Whether that means it would focus more on Hocky or whether it would focus more on teen drama would be up for debate. That one is Icebreaker by A.L. Graziadi. Pucking Strong by Emily Wraith is book 4 of 4 in a series, and I'm not someone that reads books out of order, but this I think's the winner because it's got a fake dating or a fake marriage trope, and fake dating is my favourite romance trope, all-time favourite. So it's a bad idea, but I do want to read the fake dating Hocky book. So I started on my not Rachel Reid Hocky romance comparison book. It's not any of the ones that I talked to you about or that I considered starting when we last spoke. I found myself struggling with the cover designs, put me off. The first person descriptions on the summaries put me off. I was so in the Game Changers universe, I needed something to really pull me out of it because I was really reluctant to let go. But I have found one. I am quarter of the way through and I am absolutely loving it. I am currently reading Shots on Net by JJ Mulder. It's very, very different from both the Game Changers books. It's very different. This one is set in North Carolina, and instead of a pro hockey league, this is about college students. We have one that is on athletic path. He comes from a really wealthy family who expect him to do business rather than sports, but he does have, therefore, a spare room going in the flat that his parents have obviously paid for. Which civilian, I guess, is a kind of nerdy maths geek who desperately needs somewhere to live, is very hard up for cash. The two of them move in together. So we have more of a college roommates opposites attract storyline, with Hocky so far really just being a flavour, a kind of a background interest for one of them. There has been even less Hocky in this than there was in my other There's No Hocky in These Hocky books. But I'm having a great time with it. Both the characters are my babies, and they're both really good representation. We have Carter, who is bisexual and very open to casual relationships. Carter's issues are largely stemming from this wealthy family he comes from. We see him trying to rebel against what his family expects of him. At the same time, he's really struggling with his classes. We see him taking a compulsory English class and really struggling with the books he's given. He's not enjoying his course. He's not excited by it. He's scraping by. I think it does say that if he didn't have sports, he'd probably be an okay student, but sports are where his passion is. On the other hand, we have Zeke, who is demisexual. He's doing computing. He is much more from a poor background. His struggles are more that he is struggling with that lack of money, and also he lives with has lived with his grandmother. His parents died when he was younger, and we're starting to have that worry, that nagging concern that his gran is getting on a bit. She's the only person, the only family he has, and he's anxious about what happens when he eventually loses her. So there's quite heavy topics here, but none of them are to do with the secrecy of the relationship. There's no issues around coming out. Our characters aren't together at the moment, and neither of them really seems to expect it to become anything. We have started to see some real longing from Carter. He's definitely starting to take an interest in Zeke, but he's very respectful of the fact that as demisexual, he doesn't expect anything to be happening. He's aware that Zeke is not going to be interested in the kind of casual relationship he thinks is all that he deserves. The conflict, the romantic conflict here, is going to be getting these idiots together. There's not that weightiness of forbidden romance the way there is in Heated Rivalry, or coming out the way there is in Game Changers. But there are still those darker subjects, like I said, the struggles with school, the struggles with family. So there's a lot happening here, but it does have a cozier feel overall. So far, we've largely just looked at the two of them starting to kind of feel each other out as friends. As I said, they're very, very different people, and we're starting to see those kind of tentative shiftings as they get to know each other. They're going on some kind of wild non-date dates once a week. We've had them going crazy golf, axe throwing, to the zoo, and we're starting to see them get to know each other through these dates. So it's been really cute and really fun. The Hocky I would like to see more of. So far, we know that Carter plays hockey. We've seen him at, I think, one training session. We know that he has at least one friend on the team, although this, more so than the Game Changers books, does feel like it maybe lacks the supporting cast. I'm hoping that as the book goes on, we're going to get to see more of their support systems. I'm really, really enjoying this one. I don't want to jinx it, but I might even enjoy this more than the other two books. But with Hocky being such, so far, a minor part in this book, it does kind of make me wonder what makes a hockey romance a hockey romance. And I'm sure there are people who are deep in the genre that could tell me that. But for me, I've just been considering a hockey romance to be something that has one of the characters have an interest or a job or whatever in hockey. And this one, yeah, Carter does, but it's such a minor part that I feel like I would categorize this more as a college roommates romance that just so happens to have a little bit of hockey for flavour. Shots on Net was an absolute delight. It might not be as hyped as the Game Changer series, but it was definitely up there in terms of enjoyment, and I actually think that I would rate this one slightly higher. When I last spoke to you, I said that we really hadn't had any hockey in this hockey romance, But the second half of the book really turned that around. We saw some games, we heard about agenting, we heard about being picked up by different teams, we saw a few more of Carter's teammates and his interactions with them, and Carter's choices about what to do with his future, whether he was wanting to play professional hockey, risking losing his family support, or want to stick it with business school to make his life easier. And how all of that affected his relationship with Zeke became really important to the plot as we went through the second half. I still don't understand hockey, but that didn't matter. I got enough of it that I really did feel like a substantial point of this book was, for Carter specifically, hockey related. It was a big part of his character arc, of his growth, and of his choices. The two characters together just, they were so cute. The two characters together just really, they're so good together. There's such a nice dynamic there. I really like the way JJ Mulder done the slow development of both romantic feelings and kind of sexual interest between them. I really liked the way the friendship built, then the romance built. There was a really slow burn into attraction and sexual interest. I listened to this one on audiobook and I have to say the narrators did a great job. It is a dual narration and both the narrators do obviously the voice for their own character and a voice for the other character, and both versions of both characters felt close enough that you could easily go, that's Zeke talking, whether it's in Zeke or Carter's POV and vice versa, but not exactly the same that you could tell whose POV you were in. It was a very, very well done dual narration. I really enjoyed it. Sometimes when it's a kind of two male narrators, they can sound a little bit samey, or they can sound like they're doing too much to change their voice, too gravelly or too high pitched to distinguish them. Whereas I thought in this it was nice. There was enough distinction between the two characters and the two narrators, but it felt very natural and it was really enjoyable. The whole production was incredibly well done. And I just loved the story so much. This one was definitely a 5-star read for me. While I enjoyed JJ Mulder's writing, I would personally, I think, rather see more from Zeke and Carter. I would rather see what happens to them in the next year than flip to follow another relationship. And I guess maybe that's where Rachel Reid's done something smart with the Game Changers. She does go with different characters, different relationships, the way you expect, but you know that she's coming back to Shane and Ilya every now and again, and maybe that gives you that need to continue with the series, whereas this one I feel like I can put it down and I've had a complete standalone. It's something maybe to consider. So what have I learned about my own reading in this vlog? I have definitely found out that I enjoy these particular hockey romances. Going forward, I'm not going to be searching out hockey romances because they're hockey romances. The hockey is interesting enough to me, but it's still not something I really care about on a personal level. So I wouldn't be picking up a book just because it's a hockey romance, the way I would pick up a book basically just because it had fake dating, because that's my favourite trope. But on the other hand, I also wouldn't discount a book now because it has hockey in it. I, in the past, might have thought I didn't know enough about it to care if it was taking up a big portion of the book. It wouldn't be something that I was drawn to. I'm still going to be looking at summaries, and it will still be the plot that has to capture me rather than just the subgenre before I pick it up. But at the same time, I'm not going to let that subgenre put me off. So I think that's a success. I've even come out of that deep dive where I found Shots on Net with 2 or 3 books that I think sound really, really good anyway, have lots of really interesting representation, seem like their plot is quite unique and original, and just so happen to have hockey as one of the major framing devices. So I'm excited to try those out when I'm in the mood for them. I'd love to try a vlog like this with some other sports romances, maybe some basketball or some tennis or some football. If there are any particular sports romances where you think that sport makes for really good romance, or you have any specific book recommendations in a specific sport, then let me know in the comments. I am not a sports girl. They throw ball, yes. Like, I don't know anything about sports, but I would like to try some more of these romances, so I'm very happy to take recommendations and I'm excited to hear what you think, both of the genre in general. Heated Rivalry, if you've read it, then you can compare the two, which do you prefer? But even if you've just seen the TV show, I'd really like to know what you think of it. Do you think that it lives up to the hype? I've been really won over, and I may or may not have already ordered the entire 7 books in the Game Changer series from the publisher because they're re-releasing them and they were on sale. So look forward to those in future vlogs. So if you'd like to see more from me about Rachel Reid's books, more about sports romance in general, or maybe something to do with book to TV show adaptations, let me know in the comments, or just leave me some kind of sports emoji. If you want to see those vlogs when they come out, then please subscribe to the channel, and I really hope that I'll see you in future videos. Goodbye.